All right, today we're going to learn about converting fractions, decimals, and percents, and this should be something from 6th grade that is a review for everybody. When converting measurements, how should labels look and why? So I'm talking about converting measurements, which means you have to have that conversion charts to do them. So an example of how that would look is if I gave you 5 tons and you needed to convert that into pounds, we would say that our labels had to be one in the numerator and one in the denominator. That way we could simplify our labels down to pounds only because that's the conversion I would want. So the answer to this question is how should my labels look and why? My labels should be in the numerator and denominator and opposites so that I can cancel my labels out. Problem solving. Shing drew a scale drawing of a community college. The scale of the drawing was 1 centimeter to 8 meters. A building at the college was 160 meters long in real life, and we want to know how long the building is in a drawing. So we're comparing centimeters to meters, and we're going to use the scale they give us in the problem. So 1 centimeter is equivalent to 8 meters. And we know we're talking about a building that is 160 meters long. And in the drawing, we can't use meters. That would be very big. So we convert it down to this centimeters using a scale. So this is not a measurement conversion, it's a scale factor. We don't know the centimeters, so they're x. So I'm going to cross multiply my 2, and I get 160 equals 8x. I'm going to divide by 8 on both sides of the equation so that my 8's simplify to 1. I get x equals 8 goes into 16 twice, 8 goes into 0, 0 times. So my measurement is 20 centimeters in the scale drawing of the building. Now we're going to get into the heart of our lesson with converting fractions, decimals, and percents. So there's a few rules on this page that you'll want to pay attention to. The first rule is to get a percent, we always multiply by 100 because percent is out of 100. The second rule is to get rid of a percent, we divide by 100. So this over here is all about percentages. We also always want to make sure that we round our percents to the nearest tenth. So if it's in the directions, you should always be rounding. The second two things that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to do stuff with fractions and decimals. So one clear rule about fractions we've talked about all year is they must be simplified. And one clear rule about the decimals is they should have a clear decimal. So make sure they're present. Don't put any unwanted things when you're writing decimals. So we're going to start by going from a fraction to a decimal and then over to a percent. So I'm doing this first box on the very top of this chart. And I'm highlighting it right now. You have to convert the fraction to a decimal. In order to convert a fraction to a decimal, there's two ways of doing this. We can say, does the fraction 5/8 go into a denominator of 10 or 100 evenly? It does not, so I cannot do this option, and my last remaining option is that I take my numerator divided by my denominator, and when I divide 5 divided by 8, I get 0.625. I'm going to kind of bring this down a little. So I put that decimal exactly in the decimal spot, so 0.625. Then I go over to the percent box. In order to take a decimal to a percent, we move the decimal 2 places to the right. So going from decimal to percent. So I'm going to move this decimal 2 slots, and I get 62.5%. And since it's already rounded to the nearest tenth, I leave it. Our second example starts with a decimal in the second row of this chart. and the decimal is 1 45 hundredths. You could do percent first, fraction first, it doesn't matter, but since we're going to a decimal, from a decimal to a percent, we're again going to move this decimal 2 places to the right, and I get 145%. So yes, it is okay to have a percent over 100. To go from a decimal to a fraction, we read it and then simplify. So this says the whole number 1, and then it says 45 hundredths. So I write 45 over 100. I know I can simplify both 45 and 100 by dividing by 5. So I get 1 9/20 as my final fraction, simplified. My last box on the very bottom of this chart starts us off with a percentage. And when I start with a percent, I have to know where a decimal is located in a number. So in any number, a decimal is located at the very back end of the number. And in order to go from a percent to a decimal, I move 2 places to the left. So I go 1, 2. And this happens to make my decimal just be the whole number. Let me fix that over here. 1, 2. It just makes it a whole number of 9. And yes, you can have a whole number in your decimal. And then to make a whole number a fraction, we just simply put it over 1. So 9 over 1. So there are some special characteristics when moving between fractions, decimals, and percents. You can have whole numbers over 1. You can't have whole numbers as a decimal. You can have percents over 100. Let's go to the next slide. Sometimes we don't just have to order them least to greatest, but we can order, when we order them, we have to actually change them all into the same form in order to compare them. So if I'm looking at this problem, I'm going from least to greatest. I prefer to go into all percents. If you prefer to go into decimals, you can do decimals, or if you prefer to go fractions, but I think it's very easy to compare percentages. So I can leave this 60%. And I'm actually going to need to make this 5/8 go into a decimal first. So I do 5 divided by 8. And 5 divided by 8, again, gives me 0.625. And then I'm going to take that and I'm going to make it to a percentage by moving it 2 places to the right and getting 62.5%. Then I want to do the same thing with 6/100. So I move it 2 places over to the right, and I get 6%. So now I'm comparing 60%, 62.5%, and 6%. So least to greatest, I know that 0.06 is the smallest, 60% is the next smallest, and then 5/8. So you're probably asking, why am I not writing them as a percentage? Well, I'm just simply putting it in the original form. Then we have some word problems. Billy earned 45 out of 60 on the keyboarding test. What is the percent of his score? So we're doing 45 out of 60, like a fraction, and then we're going to move it into decimal form next. So I know 60 cannot go into 100 evenly, so I'm going to take 45 and I'm going to divide it by 60, and yes, you can use your calculator to do this, and you get 0.75. And then I'm going to move 2 places to the right, and I get that he had a 75% on his test score. Moving down to this next slide. So what I want you to do is I'm going to have the guest teacher pause this video, and I want you guys to try and convert the fractions, decimals, and percents in here. And then I'm going to give you the answers, and I want you to check and make sure you're doing the right thing. All right, so first box, hopefully you've worked through these with a partner for a few minutes. You have the fraction 4/11. So when I take 4 divided by 11, you are going to get 0.36, and it's going to repeat. So we are going to leave that as 3636. Then to go over into our percentage, we are going to move it 2 places to the right, and you get 336.36. And remember, all percents need to be rounded to the nearest tenth. So I'm going to round that. 6 makes the 3 go up. So I get 36.4%. Second set of boxes, I start with a decimal. I'm going to go ahead and easily make that a percent by moving 2 places to the right. When I have a blank, I get a 0 in that blank, so that's 80%. And then I'm going to read it as 8/10 for the fraction, simplify by dividing by 2, and get 4/5. And then our last row in this chart, we're starting with a percentage. Remember that has that decimal at the end. We move it 2 places to the left, and we get 0.32. And that is equivalent to 32 over 100. I'm going to take 32 over 100, and I am going to divide it by 4. And I get 8/25 as my simplified fraction. On this next slide, go ahead and pause it again. Take a few minutes to work with a partner, and then come back and check your work. So I'm going to go over least to greatest first. I'm going to change everything into a percentage. So I know that the fraction 5/6, when I divide it out, I get 0.83 repeating. So when I move the decimal 2 places, I get 83.3%. And then I already have a percent with 110. And then I'm going to move this decimal 2 places to the right and get 115%. So ordering least to greatest, I get 5/6, 110%, and 1.15, which is the exact order it came in. And sometimes that happens. And then our last one, 82% of Franklin students were on the honor roll. What simplified fraction is this percent? So I write 82%, which is 82 over 100. And then I simplify this fraction. So automatically I know that 82 divided by 2 is 41, and 100 divided by 2 is 50. So there's my simplified fraction. All right, we are going to stop there, and I'm going to have you guys go ahead and start your in-class practice. And if you have any questions, go ahead and refer back to this teaching video.